It seems that onions live in this halfway world between vegetables and spices. I love a great onion dish, and they show up in 18th century cooking in some very interesting ways, especially in English cookery where we're not expecting onions to show up in sort of high cooking. They do show up just in that very way. Now, if we look at some other cultures in the 18th century, say Spanish or Italian cookery, we're going to find onions used in some very different ways. But in English cookery and in North American cookery, well, it's a little bit tamer. But some very surprising dishes still show up. We do have some classic English things like pickled onions, or the very incredible onion pie, or some very special onion sauces that we're going to talk about. But what are onions here in the 18th century? They are actually a very old kind of food. They're coming into Great Britain probably with the Romans. So by the 18th century, they have had onions for more than 1,000 years. So they're not something new and special in English cookery. They have lots of different kinds of onions: white onions, Spanish onions, red onions. They have small onions and large onions. They've got green onions, and they use them in various kinds of dishes. In this time period, we have places that specialize in onions, or farms. There is a particular article that references 20 acres of onions being grown just for the seed. We don't normally think about onion seeds today, but that's exactly what's happening in the 18th century. And we have places in North America that also specialize in onions. There's a particular town in Connecticut called Wethersfield, and they're known for growing onions in the 17th century as well as the 18th century. So many onions that they would export them to the West Indies. So lots of onions being grown in North America. If you look at Matthew Patton's diary, he mentions onions several different times where he's purchasing large quantities of onions. He's also purchasing onion seeds so he can grow onions. So it's a very popular ingredient for the time period. Now, onions are popular for some very particular reasons, not necessarily because of the flavor, which I'm sure that's one of the reasons, but also because it's very prolific when you grow them. Now, onions do take very rich ground, but they grow easily. They grow very quickly in some circumstances, but they also are a product that comes out of the ground and stores very easily. So we don't have to do a lot to an onion to make it so that it's good for 6 months or even into the next year. Onions also show up not just in food, but in medicinal settings. So maybe not in traditional sort of professional medicine, while they might mention onions, but they show up in folk medicine a lot. John Wesley's book about primitive physic. So this is basically folk medicine for regular people who can't afford to go to the doctor. He uses onions in many of the different remedies. Remedies for things like ague and for earaches or deafness. Might work for baldness, also for piles, or it may be skin cancer. He is using onions for so many different illnesses. I don't know if it helped with any of them, but they certainly thought so. It's very interesting how they deal with this very, very flavorful component. Onions are rarely used as the only part of a dish, other than really the example of the baked onion, where they might eat that all by itself. Most of the time, it's just there for some flavor. Sometimes they're even trying to extract too much of the flavor out of the onion before they put it in the dish. So they might take an onion and soak it in water, soak it in milk, even cook it a little bit, and then take that water and throw it out. Do it one more time and throw it out, and then put the onion in the dish so that you just get some onion flavor. And then you have the opposite effect, where they'll take an onion, they'll take the skin off of it, they'll put cloves in it, so it kind of looks like a grenade or something, and then they'll put that in a dish that's stewing. Then, after it stews for 15-20 minutes, they'll take it out. They'll take that onion and the clove out and just leave behind the onion flavor and a little clove flavor. And they're just bringing that wonderful onion flavor in and not having the onion itself in the dish at all. I'm going to do a couple of onion recipes, but I thought I would read several that I thought were very interesting. We won't be cooking these. There is the one where we do pickled onions, right? We've done an episode on pickled onions. Very simple, small white onions. We put them in a pickling sauce and that's it. And very common for the 18th century. There's also one that caught me off guard that I wasn't expecting to see for 18th century cookery. I think you might see it a lot more today, and it's called a carrier sauce. Now this is a cold condiment sauce that we might use for mutton. It says take some green onions, cut them very small, put them in a sauce boat with pepper, salt, and water, and serve it up cold. So it's uncooked. It's just green onions, salt and pepper and water, or we might use some oil in that. You might think of that as almost like a vinaigrette. There's also the classic Robert sauce, which is where we take some large onions, we cut them up into pieces, cook them with bacon, put them in a saucepan, and we make this very, very savory sauce. Again, this might have mustard in it, some other things to make just a very rich, flavorful sauce, and serve that with something like pork or even with beef. The first recipe we are going to make is an onion pie. This is out of Hannah Glass. I'm going to read it from Primitive Cookery. This is from right in the middle of the 18th century and from one of the most popular cookbooks. To make an onion pie, wash and pare some potatoes and cut them into slices. Peel some onions and cut them in slices. Pare some apples and slice them. Make a good crust. Cover your dish. Lay 1/4 pound of butter all over. Take 1/4 ounce of mace, beat fine, a nutmeg grated, a teaspoonful of beaten pepper, 3 teaspoonfuls of salt. Mix it all together. Strew some over the butter. Lay a layer of potatoes, a layer of onion, and a layer of apples, and a layer of eggs, and so on till you have filled your pie. Strewing a little of the seasoning between each layer, and 1/4 pound of butter in bits, 6 spoonfuls of water. Close your pie and bake it an hour and a half. A pound of potatoes, a pound of onions, and a pound of apples, and 12 eggs will do. We're going to make a pie much smaller than the one that the recipe calls for. The author of this recipe is probably making a 5-pound pie. We don't need to have such a giant pie, so I'm just going to use 3 or 4 apples and the same for all the other components. While this recipe is a long read, it's actually very easy to do. We're going to take our components like our onions and potatoes. The potatoes we will peel first and then slice them up into fairly thin pieces. We're going to take our onion and do basically the same thing. Let's slice it up in about 1/8 inch thick slices. We also have apples. We can slice these up however we want, but we do want, again, thin slices, so everything's basically the same, along with some boiled eggs. It doesn't really explain this in the recipe, but I'm pretty sure we have boiled eggs here and not just eggs. You can't put a layer of goopy eggs in. So we have boiled eggs. We're going to put spices between each layer, and the spices are the classic, basically salt, pepper, nutmeg, mace. Nutmeg and mace are very similar, so if you don't have both of those, either one of those will do. Put in lots of butter. There's butter in the bottom as well as butter in the top, and a little water, and we're going to bake this pie with a top crust so it holds all that moisture in for about 1.5 hours. This smelled so good I had to open it up probably before I should have. It is so wonderful and savory smelling. Let's give it a try. This pie is so good. Doesn't have any meat components to it, but all that wonderful butter and all those flavors along with the sweetness of the apple really sets it off. It is an amazing dish, and so many people have tried it from when we have done this episode 10 years ago, and it is some people's favorite dish. Our next recipe comes from the Cooks and Confectioners Dictionary. I won't read to you the whole recipe. We're going to adjust it just a touch, but this is the essence. We're going to take onions and slice them up. We're going to go ahead and take apples and slice them up. And now we can either fry them or bake them. One of the recipes calls for putting them in a pan and covering them with paper and baking them along with bread. But the idea here is that we cook them down until they're both nice and soft. We can do that also right here in the pan on the fire. And now we can take them and put them over sippets of bread, basically nice, thick, toasted bread pieces, and sprinkle on top of that sugar and cinnamon. This happens so many times in these recipes. We have onions, apples, sugar, cinnamon, and bunches of butter along with these bread sippets, and they come out smelling so good. This looks great. Let me tell you, it smells amazing whenever we cook apples and onions like this, and we're gonna put it on bread along with the cinnamon and the sugar. I haven't tried this, so let's find out. So it's like halfway between this very, very savory thing and a sweet at the same time. It's just onions and apples and a little sugar and cinnamon along with the bread, and it is a very impressive little dish. There are some very surprising dishes here when we dig into onions, especially when we use them in a way like this. So I really want to encourage you to stretch out, try some onions in some very different ways. Maybe you could try to baking them. They're incredible that way. This is such a fun item to experiment with. Thanks for watching.